Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stan Houston. Once again, this is a striking, maybe not a shocking, but a striking news day. And the title of the program that you saw very much reminded me of something that happened to me many years ago. And I can bring you up to date on what is happening now. Yes, I remember it well. Most of you probably don't know where you were many, many years ago, like May 13th, 1981. Of course not. Well, I do. Well, there's a good reason why I do, because that's the day in which I had one of the stories that really struck the world, and I was on the radio at that time. Let me tell you a little bit about how it worked. I was the program director and one of the major announcers for a large international radio station called Trans World Radio, and it broadcast in about 15 different languages from a huge radio station down in the Southern Caribbean on what was known as the island of Bonaire, which, by the way, was also known not only for its radio stuff. It was known because it was one of the scuba diving places in the world. And I enjoyed that as part of my stretch and stay on Bonaire. But this is the way the radio station worked. And remember, now we're going back a number of years ago. This is before there were even any real computers that did any of the work that is now done. Uh, and so what happened was that we had a large studio there where we actually made real programs and recorded most of them. And then they were played in a big control room on about 5 different transmitters that went all around the world. So it was quite an operation. And because of that, many of the programs were done in advance, which is always a bit of a problem, but they were recorded on recording tape. That's what it was, recording tape, these reels of recording tape, and they were sent through the mail or by express. And at the certain time that they were to be played in master control, the master controller, the engineer on shift that time would play the right programs on the right transmitters. It was quite a complicated process. Now, what was true is I was in charge of a program at that time called Caribbean Night Call, and it was one of the few programs that was actually done live. That meant at 11:05 every week. At least it was every weekday, usually every weekday evening. 11:05, right o'clock after the 11 o'clock news for 5 minutes. At 11:05, we would play the theme song, and it would come on. It was a late night music and musings program. Even though we were a Christian broadcast station, this particular program was very much geared toward anybody. So we had a number of things that made it very, very popular. And we had a large listening audience, particularly through the Caribbean and throughout the world. And we were one of the real late night radio stations. And so that was a significant part of my life. I learned a lot about life and business and radio there. And then sometimes not only was that went from 11:05 to 1:05, then sometimes we would actually be we were in charge of a program called Morning Sounds, which meant that at 7:05. So now that was usually a different way of doing things, but there were times when I worked both of those and just caught up 2 or 3 or 4 hours of sleep in between and then back at the studio. But what I had decided to do that day was I didn't want to be up that night. So we had a process by which, in effect, I would go into the studio and with a big hour-long recording tape, I would time it and I would actually do the radio program as exactly as if I were doing it live from 11:05 to 12 o'clock. And then from 12:05 after the 12 o'clock news to 1 o'clock when the program came to an end and we would play the Netherlands Antilles national anthem because the radio station would then sign off for the evening. So that was the way it worked. So I, at that particular day, I decided that I was going to do the program on recording. So I went up and put my time in, and Radio work requires energy and intensity. So you work hard to put on a 2 or 3 hour program is a pretty intense work. And we would do it so that we would actually have clocks that were set as to what it would really be if we were live on the air. So we could even say, well, it's 20 minutes past the hour or something like that. Oftentimes, because you never knew exactly how it might work, we would say it's about, and we would just kind of refer to things that if we had a few seconds off or a few minutes off, that might not be a real problem. But really, we couldn't do that very much. Had to get it right. Well, I had recorded the program for May 13th, 1981, that evening. And I came down and I walked into master control and had the two big things. And I said, Stan, what are we going to do? The Pope has been shot. And that's what we now, huge listening audience around the world, huge listening audience in Latin America, where, of course, the majority of people are of the Catholic faith. This was the news story. What's it going to sound like if I get on the air and I don't even talk about that? I say, what kind of are you on? What planet are you on? Now, I couldn't do anything about the other programs, but I could certainly do something about my program. Well, very simply, I took the things I had, I said, toss them. We're not going to use them. He said, well, Stan, what are you going to do? And I said, we're going live. And of course, that's exactly what we did. So I went back, got a little rest, and came back at about 10:30 and went through the program live and actually made some calls on some people who gave some of their points of view, but it was a live late night program broadcast around the world. And it was reflections on the shooting of the Pope. I remember one line that I used, it just came to me, is that we listened to all the station, went to BBC, Voice of America. We were getting all the information we could about what was happening. And one of the things that was reported was that someone screamed out when they heard that the Pope had been shot, is they said, oh my gosh, it's like shooting God. Well, you have to remember that in many people's view, the Pope, just like those persons who think about Jesus, that in some way they kind of represent each other, and to shoot the Pope would be like trying to shoot God. Or, as he pointed out, crucifying Jesus might be like crucifying God. Well, I played a little bit with that, but not really a great deal. I just mentioned the fact that you never know what people will do here on planet Earth. And what do we do when good people are struck down by people who are doing bad things? As I recall, the program went quite well, though I oftentimes felt that I was a little bit off balance because I had so little time to prepare and because the news was changing so fast. And at the same time, I had to make sure that I had my guy in master control uh, uh, monitoring the other news stations. And if there was anything new that changed, he'd run up to the studio, when we were playing some music, and he would give me some things like that. But by 1 o'clock, we made it. And I remember that feeling. I was obviously a much younger man at that time, but I was worn out and remember it well. But here's the interesting thing I just want to point out to you, and see, look at what if I had done this program yesterday, program for Monday, which I could have easily done, and sometimes I have done. But no, when I got up at 4 o'clock this morning for my fourth hour is the hour of power, getting ready for the day, that's what I heard. And so my responsibility as a broadcaster, as a communicator, is to talk about what's happening now. Obviously, the things of the Pope are not tragic. Um, it's a remarkable story. You know, It- it's almost as if he knew he wanted to get through Easter and be there for the Easter service, and then I've known people who are sick who've just decided to die, and they do. And of course, there will be thoughts about that. And there will be many, many tributes to this very powerful, but also very humble man, very controversial in many people's hearts, minds, and spirits. And the whole issue of who will succeed him, who will the people of the Catholic tradition of faith, who will be the next pope, and how will he, I guess it will always be a he, at least for a while, be selected, and what kind of leadership might they be about? And that will dominate the news, as it will dominate the news this entire day, and at least for 2 or 3 days, and most of the week. Which, of course, people who are afraid that the news might get them in trouble, as we say, you're lucky. Guess what? The news cycle won't mention you now, because the news cycle will mention the big story of the moment. That's always something we had to be aware of, that when we actually were doing that, that we weren't also ignoring the other smaller news stories that could be just as important to the country and to the people, and to make sure we handled the big story, but we also make sure we didn't ignore the littler, smaller stories. Good radio is like life. It's all about making choices, and some of them are good, some of them not so good, some of them turn out to be mistakes. Uh, there will be a time when I would walk away from a program, and they'd say, "How did it go?" And I would say, "It's okay." Um, and that's what I meant. I wasn't particularly happy with it. I didn't think it was all I wanted it to be, but that happens. That happens. But you try and you try and bat at least 90% as best you can. Well, I wanted to tell you that story, but I'm also saying is, look at the opportunities that you have in life and business, and right now is that you have the opportunity to speak right to the audience in the life and moment, what's ever going on in their life. Uh, I remember telling one company, particularly when I was in Minnesota, always make sure that when there's a big snowstorm, is that you clear out some ads that are ready to go, and you call the stores that sell snow blowers, and you know get them to do an ad, because everyone's thinking about all the snow. And you might be able to sell a few extra snow blowers if you happen to mention it on the radio and say, "Oh, the snow is really big out there. Don't you wish you had a snow blower?" Because he was right at the moment. And of course, that's one of the great powers, and why I love radio and love video. That's point of the moment, POM. It speaks right to where people are doing what they're doing. You don't need to, get it all printed out. You don't need to copy it and then edit it and then make sure there's the proper punctuation and spelling. You can be right there. Well, best and blessings to you. We will see how the world and how the news responds. But also keep this in mind, and this will be a subject for later. Remember, as one of my mentors said, Stan, remember that oftentimes, if it's in the news, it's not really the news. Just because it's in the news doesn't really mean it's the news. Your job, Stan, is to make sure you discover and tell the real news, maybe the good news, the right news, because the news is seldom the real news. I'll just let that sit on your head for a while. Thank you for your time on this Monday morning. I wish you all the best and blessings. And as we approach a change of seasons, that we will find ourselves that this might be the season of our life. I mentioned this in my Easter message that this will be the season of your life, that some significant things might happen for you and your family and your business and your concern, that new and significant things, real news, can be a part of your life. Take care. I'm Stan Houston for the What It Takes Radio, and I guess we'll just call this Interesting Ideas, a little bit of the Transformation Zone, a bit of the Impact Zone, and all the best and bye for now.